I noticed something in my rearview mirror, and it was all these changing colors of light, and it was moving very rapidly toward my direction. But I could tell that it wasn't down on the road, it was up above the trees. It was going very, very fast. It just instantaneously stopped. When it went from fast, zipping along to just stopped. I'm just puzzling as an engineer. I'm an aerospace engineer, so how is it staying there stationary in the sky like that? And of course, it was a bit of an ontological shock in the moment as I realized, no, this is not a craft of anything I'm familiar with. There was no real prosaic explanation for what it was.
Hi guys, it's Jimmy here from the UAP files. Now tonight we're going to be talking about an incident that occurred on December 26th, 1980. Now that's a very specific date that will be etched in the minds of many UFO enthusiasts and UFO lore. It is of course the night of the very famous Rendlesham Forest UFO Incident, also dubbed the British Roswell. Now not far from that location was a US Air Force test pilot, a Top Gun pilot stationed on UK soil. He encountered something quite extraordinary, something that hovered silently, impossibly close before accelerating away with non-human, physics-defying characteristics. Our guest tonight is Tanna Isbell, aka Tanna, and his credentials are not just impressive, they are unimpeachable. A Top Gun level fighter pilot, dual qualified, who has flown over 70 different variations of aircraft, a former experimental test instructor at the elite US Air Force Test Pilot School, 514th Flight Test Squadron Commander, F-16 Flight Test Division Chief, and Weapons System Analyst for the Office of the Secretary of Defense. He later became an F-22 Air Vehicle Program Manager and then Directed Energy Weapons Chief at the Air Force Research Lab. Cutting-edge military technology, lasers, and systems far beyond conventional aerospace. He has spent decades consulting at Pentagon level, holds ongoing high-level top-secret clearances, and remains a trusted subject matter expert on advanced weapons and flight systems. And tonight, he's sharing an experience he's kept secret for 45 years, only recently coming forward. He breaks his silence about what he saw that night near Rendlesham and 3 other UFO encounters he's had, from triangles to impossible orbs. We go into detail on the craft near Rendlesham and share an FBI forensic artist recreation, as well as significant details about the craft and why he came forward now. So without further ado, the following is a conversation with Tanna Isbell.
So then they asked me to create courses for warfighters, because if you send out laser physicists with PhDs to teach warfighters who don't have a science, technology, engineering and math kind of background, it just goes over their head and they tune out real quickly and get up and walk out, because it's not something they can understand if you just present all the very complex physics equations involved in doing directed energy. So they asked me if since I spent the first part of my Air Force career as a fighter pilot and certainly kind of understood, had been a commander, I've had a lot of enlisted and other folks under my command. So they asked me if I could write up some courses that would be more in layman's terms. And so I did that, and that was very successful. And so that I spent from 2010 until I retired in 2024, sort of traveling the world, going to the various combatant commands like European Command, Pacific Command, Indo-Pacific Command, NORAD.
If it's okay, are we able to sort of jump forward a little bit to sort of, jump back, I guess, to 1980 and your experiences there, and can you talk us through it? So you were in a UK base.
Okay, I arrived at the RAF Upper Heyford, UK in December of 1979. And had to go through some NATO qualification training, so a few months there of just learning the ropes on how to fly in NATO and be a part of the ICAO air traffic control system. And so just getting that familiarity, and then you go through a number of weapons training events to make sure that you're good on all of that. And then eventually, once your top secret SCI clearance is fully vetted, then you become mission ready. And that happened in about June of 1980. So at that point, I'm flying regular missions as a fully rated combat fighter pilot. And we also had to sit alert. And the alert was called Victor Alert with special weapons. And those duties were 1 week at a time. So Friday to Friday. So you did 7 days on alert. And in alert, you're kind of stuck inside of revetted concrete hangars with no windows. And that was to be expected. I mean, we had a lot of senior majors, lieutenant colonels that had, 100 missions flying in Vietnam and F-105s and such. I didn't mind that, but obviously by the next year, I was not the guy that was pulling all the holidays. Somebody else would be the guy. But anyway, that's how I ended up where I was when I was. And that's why it's so easy to remember that December 26th is when I had that first encounter. So I had a red Corvette that I purchased after I got to England through the Army's and Air Force exchange shows, and I had it shipped over. And so I'm driving my red Corvette home from the base to just south of the town of Bicester, a little area called Chesterton. And so, RAF Upper Havert's about 12 miles north of Oxford, England. It's in Oxfordshire, nestled in the Cotswolds, which is a lot of rolling hills and farming country. Beautiful place. Beautiful. So I'm headed home to my assigned base housing, which they had a small subdivision that was constructed for people that were assigned to the base to have, a place to live. And that's on the way home, I was passing a golf course that I was familiar with. I'd played on it before, called the Bicester Golf Course. And it was a very small 2-lane road, kind of woodsy. And as I'm driving down that road, I noticed something in my rearview mirror, and it was all these changing colors of light, and it was moving very rapidly toward my direction. But I could tell that it wasn't down on the road, it was up above the trees. And like most golf courses, this one had some guard trees that were out along, the edges, so that if somebody hit a stray ball, hopefully the trees would keep it from hitting the park. So, and of course there were trees on the course. But I was familiar with the place when it zipped by me and it was going very, very fast, it just instantaneously stopped. When it went from fast zipping along to just stopped, and it's completely stationary. And of course that caught my attention because, there was no sound. And of course these lights that were constantly changing around the bottom, it wasn't like light bulbs that were blinking, they were blending into these various colors. So in my mind, as an engineer kind of guy, it reminded me of sort of a plasma kind of effect along the bottom of the craft. The craft was triangular, but not pointed on the front. It was a little bit curved on the front end, kind of pointed on the back ends. I only saw the side and bottom of the craft from, I guess it was up around 50, 60 feet above the ground when it stopped there. So I couldn't see the front or the top of the craft, and it was a very dark night. But it caught my attention to the point that of course, now I'm in an American vehicle, so I'm driving on the left-hand side of the vehicle, and I'm driving in the left lane. So there was no traffic. There was no other cars on the road. So I pulled across the oncoming lane and pulled off the road on the side there next to the golf course. And I got out of my Corvette and I'm just standing there staring at it. And, you know, as part of our NATO training, we were required to memorize and instantly recognize all the types of threat aircraft from the Soviet Union that we might encounter in helicopters and identify friend or foe. We had to know and identify all the NATO aircraft. So we were regularly tested on that, and I'm just in shock because this is certainly not an aircraft. It has no wings. It had no visible means of propulsion. It had no helicopter blades. It was making no noise whatsoever. And of course, our jet fighters don't stop instantly like that because of the momentum and the inertia. So I'm just puzzling as an engineer. I'm an aerospace engineer. So how is it staying there stationary in the sky like that? And of course, it was a bit of an ontological shock in the moment as I realized, no, this is not a craft of anything I'm familiar with. There was no real prosaic explanation for what it was. So I was so curious that I walked around the back of my car and across the grass toward the tree line. And as I'm walking toward the craft, it reacted to me and it began to lower itself down toward the golf green. And at that point, suddenly I'm back in reality. I'm probably 150 feet from it at that point. And, you know, the fighter pilot in me just wants to see if they'd let me hop in and take it for a spin. But the realistic fighter pilot in me said, if anybody finds out that you've had a UFO sighting, if you tell a soul, your career's over before it's, you know, just when it's very, very beginning. And so I quickly decided this is not a good idea to get closer to this craft. Plus the plasma under it, I didn't know what the effects would be, you know, if you got too close to that. As I say, that's the only way I could define these changing colors underneath the craft, as they were kind of blending up on the sides a little bit and around. So anyway, I quickly said, okay, nobody has seen you out here. Beat feet back to your car, get in, start it, and head to the house, and don't tell a soul. And so I didn't. For 45 years, I didn't tell anybody. And I couldn't even after I retired from active duty because I'm still in a top secret clearance. I'm still doing important work. And of course, when I'm trying to teach directed energy weapons, if I became known as that nutcase that saw a UFO, you know, I would not have any credibility with them. I kept it to myself until I did have an opportunity in 2022, February 10th of 2022. My stepson does some movie work. He's a professional musician, travels with a band, but he also does some soundtracks for movies. And so sometimes he's out in Hollywood and he actually knows Jeremy Corbell and is friends with Jeremy Corbell. I don't know if Jeremy is a fan of his band or exactly how that came about, but one day they're just having a chat together. He said, hey, did you ever see anything strange in the sky? Because he knows he travels well. He says, no, I haven't, but I think my stepdad has, but I have no idea because he won't talk about it, just that he's seen things. So then Jeremy says, do you think he'd be willing to come out here to LA and talk to me and George Knapp? And so I said, I don't know, I'll call him. So he called me and he said, would you be willing to come on and talk to them? And I said, I guess so. So I did fly out. I flew his mom, my wife, and I flew out to LA. And Jeremy gave us an address to meet him at. And we went out there late at night and we met in a secluded room. And he invited my stepson to come to that meeting too. So it was the four of us. It's George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, myself, and my stepson. And as they started asking me about it, I first of all said, I gave them a little background of my career. And I said, I'm still doing top secret work, so I'm not willing to come forward. I don't want to be on weaponized or anything like that yet. I'm just letting you know because I appreciate your work and that you're researching this stuff. So I told them about 3 of the 4 encounters I've had. And then on the third one, George Knapp leans in and he said, "They're tracking you." And that kind of freaked me out a little bit. Like, who's tracking me? What's tracking me? But it made me think about the fact that, yeah, each time I've moved to different places on the planet, I've had other encounters. And it's just weird. So I don't know what the explanation for any of that is. But at any rate, we had a pretty long conversation. My stepson's eyes were really big on the other side because he's hearing all this for the first time too. But they honored my request to not be outed yet. I'm just giving them this for background information. The next month, I think it was the 22nd or 23rd of March, Linda Moulton Howe had on her Earth Files YouTube. She had somebody that was going by the pseudonym. They didn't show his face and they disguised his voice a little. Pseudonym was Smith Jones. And Smith Jones was telling about his encounter, and he was describing, and he had a hand-drawn picture of it. He was describing the craft that he witnessed over the base at RAF Upper Hayford. And his encounter was about 3 hours and 15 minutes after my encounter. So his encounter was on the 27th at 1:15 in the morning. Mine was on the 26th at 10 p.m. at night. And I was shocked that, okay, I had not heard about that. And of course, while I was at RAF Upper Hayford, we got no information that was distributed to anybody about the Rendlesham Forest Incident. And I didn't realize that those two coincided until much later when the Rendlesham Forest thing came out. So here's this guy talking about he was guarding some weapons on a special trailer, waiting for the weapons people to come and unlock the weapons storage and put those weapons away. And so he had a rifle and, and a shoulder sling, and he's walking back and forth as a sentry. And there's nothing out there. He's seeing no threats. He's not seeing anything. And he makes another turn. And as he turns around and pivots, here's this thing nose onto him, and he's up on a bit of an incline. So it's literally hovering. So he's looking straight in the front of it. And he described 2 large transparencies like windows. And it looked like, he said, light was coming from the floor up to the ceiling, not from the ceiling down, just the way the light was. He didn't see any beings at all. But he's you can imagine he's sort of freaked out because he knows what fighter jets and stuff, that's not one of ours. And then somebody had pulled up to him and then was supposed to be there with him to help with the weapon stuff. He gets out of his truck and he goes, "That's not one of ours." And he freaks out and is in his truck and drives away and leaves this guy out there for a while. And then later the weapons people arrive, they do what they're supposed to do with the weapons. And as they come out of the, they're sort of bunkered, covered with grass and stuff, these concrete gazettments where they put these things. And at that point, the craft is directly overhead them in the weapons storage area. So he got a very good look at the bottom of the craft, as well as the front of the craft and the top of the craft. And Linda Moulton Howe put a request in her section below the video that if anyone else had seen any UFO craft in this time frame on or near the RAF Upper Hayford Airfield, to please send her a proton mail. So I established a proton mail account, with nothing close to my name in the, in the moniker for it. And I sent her a proton mail and said, yes, I had an encounter the night before, what Smith-Jones described about 3 hours, 15 minutes early. And she wrote back and said, would you be willing to give me your phone number? So I did. And the very next week, I was out in San Antonio, Texas, teaching directed energy weapons, because that was that point in my career where I'm doing a lot of that. And I think the first night I had taught courses all day. And so that Monday night, I get back to my hotel room and my cell phone rings. And it's Linda Moulton Howe, and we talked for about 2 hours, and she wanted me to do the Smith-Jones thing, disguise my voice and all this stuff. I said, well, I'm just really not ready to out any of this yet, because I'm still teaching on a top secret clearance. I can't teach and fulfill my contract if they pull my clearance. And besides that, I need all the credibility I've got to be able to have these guys listen to me and understand it, because we're starting to now deploy some of the first prototypes that were on military vehicles out in the field, so that the warfighters could get used to them, try them out, and develop tactics and so forth. So it was kind of a critical time. And so she accepted that, but I said, I'm letting you know. And I told her about all my experiences too. So had those two things going on. And then when I finally retired in December of last year, 24, I still have my top secret. They haven't taken it away yet, but I thought, okay, there's nothing holding me back now. And I'm really I'm very much in favor of there being disclosure of some sort. Maybe a controlled disclosure is better than a catastrophic one, but I feel like, this has been hidden from people for far too long. If we have definitive proof that we're not alone in the universe, that's important for humanity to realize that. So I don't know, I probably made a comment on somebody's YouTube thing, not that, but on Joined X. And so I probably made a comment, and that got picked up on. And the next thing you know, one thing led to another. And my first interview then became a dual interview with Professor Simon and Prof. Simon. And he asked Chris Lato, because Chris Lato had an F-16 fighter pilot back then. And so that first official video interview, where the part that Prof. Simon was really focused on was the RAF Upper Hayford encounter, because it connected to Rendlesham Forest on the same time frame that those incidents were happening there. And so he did about a, 20-something minute show on his channel that took sort of the latter part of that overall interview and just focused on that. And Chris did a 2-hour and 3-minute show where the first part was just focusing on building my credibility as a Top Gun fighter pilot and a top graduate of the Test Pilot School and being a Test Pilot Instructor, and all those elements of my career, which he thought, made me a very credible witness. So that was a very long show, as it turned out. And it got the comments on it I was quite shocked at. It was the first time that I'd done anything where the public had access to it. And so since then, there have been, a number of other requests, and some of those have been scheduled and done, and some are still waiting. So we'll see where all this goes. I know it's kind of, right now, I'd say the momentum is all about the Age of Disclosure movie and commenting on that and talking to people more in depth on that. And I'm assuming you've seen that at this point.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I'm willing to talk. I'm not afraid of talking about it anymore, because it's just something that happened. And, when that happens to you, you can't like erase the memory. It's like this significant emotional event. And so it stays burned in there, almost like PTSD kind of thing. You know where you were and what you were doing and what it felt like. And so it's been satisfying to get that somewhere out there in the public like that. So yeah, I had that first encounter in 1980, December 26th. The next one was in 1990. I don't know the exact date. I was on it for Edwards Air Force Base, and it was a huge, just completely black, colorless triangle. And I was out stargazing because if you drive out the south base toward the south base gate, you go past the runways in the south base, which is a classified area. We did all the B-2 stuff out of the south base of Edwards, and you keep driving down that road, you get to a point where there's no lights from the runways in the base that are interfering with the vision of the sky, and you get this perfect, it's very dry air in the Mojave Desert, and you can see the full Milky Way because it's mostly cloudless night. So I rode my motorcycle out there and just enjoying stargazing. And just totally a surprise to me, coming from behind me, is this wedge thing that starts blacking out the sky. And it's just forming this huge triangle above my head. And I felt a little electrostatic kind of tingle on my skin. And I recognize that since it's in the restricted area of the base, that I certainly couldn't rule out that this might be a reverse engineered something. So I don't know if it was a true UAP or might have been a craft that we were testing. So again, as the first case, I didn't tell anybody about it because I'm teaching test pilots now, and I'm flying a lot of different stuff. So I kept quiet about it, and I realized that there was a lot of kind of checking on people that were at Edwards because there was a lot of classified work that goes on there and at the detachments that they have, such as Area 51, which is really just a remote detachment of the Air Force Flight Test Center at Edwards. One night, as I had students on a Friday evening to sort of let their hair down a little bit, they would go to the officers' club and we'd have some just informal chats. And I had been thinking in my brain, trying to engineer a way to make an aircraft disappear visually, like a true Romulan cloaking device, from Star Trek kind of thing. And I had just come up with a theoretical way that I thought that could be done. And I'm just talking about it at the officers' club, just among a bunch of students and other instructors. And suddenly, some guys in suits come up and they grab me from the shoulder and say, "Sir, you need to come with us." I said, "Oh, okay." So they took me to a private room and said, "How do you know about that?" I said, "Know about what?" "What you were talking about at the bar." I said, "Well, I don't know about it. I was just creating that in my engineering brain, my science mind and engineering brain." He said, "Well, don't ever talk about it again because you got a program that's trying to do that right now." I said, "Oh, well, I didn't know." So I said, "Is there anything else?" They said, "No." And so they cleared me, and then I never told another soul about it. I've never since then described anything I was theorizing. So I certainly have never wanted to divulge classified information, and I've been led into a large number of unacknowledged, waived special access programs that even the name would be classified. So I wouldn't ever reveal any of that because that's national security stuff. But I don't feel the same way about. I was never briefed into anything UFO related with the Air Force. I was never an intel guy. I'm just a fighter pilot and a test pilot that's seen some things. So anyway, I didn't talk about that one. Of course, I didn't tell anybody on the base about it because I already knew if that was a compromised program, then I'm in trouble because I saw it. So now I would have to sign non-disclosure stuff about it. So I kept that to myself. And then many years later, after I retired from the Air Force in about 2014, I was living in Silver Springs, Florida, and we had a very desolate, wilderness lot, and it was right by a very primitive natural river called the Ocklawaha River, and it was right beside the Ocala National Forest. So just a beautiful, quiet place, very light quiet, and like typical, if it was a good, like November in Florida is a pretty good time to see the Milky Way if you're in a light, quiet place. And we had installed a little two-person hot tub in a very open place, but still shielded and kind of nice, but we had an open view to the sky. Used to love to go out there at night and just look at the stars, watch satellites come across. I guess mentally I was always hoping I would see something else, but most of the time, it's just the sky. And on this particular night, my wife had decided to go in a little early. I said, well, it's such a beautiful night. I'm really enjoying this. I'm going to stargaze a little longer. And so I did. I never saw anything except identifiable satellites and maybe some airliners at altitude. And I got out of the hot tub and I got my towel and I put it on and I was starting to dry off. And then I'm lit up in this cyan colored light. So it's kind of a bluish, greenish light. And it's in a circle around me. But at first I'm thinking, is there somebody out here on the lot somewhere trying to play a prank on me? But I looked around and there was nobody, and there's no light coming from horizontal. And so then I realized, wait, it's a circle around me, so it must be coming from above. And as I look up, I'm looking straight up the beam, and it kind of came together in a point, but it was bright enough. It wasn't too bright to look at, but it was bright enough that I couldn't tell what it was coming from, but there was no sound whatsoever. And it was probably, I would estimate, maybe 200 feet above me, just looking at the way the cone was coming together. It had the characteristic of like a defocused laser, because a laser is normally very, very tightly focused, and diffraction limited, so the beam stays together and the beam doesn't spread apart. So this was like a defocused laser in that it was like controlled. It didn't blossom out everywhere. It was in a controlled pattern around. And so my laser brain, at this point, I'm still doing work with high energy lasers and high power microwaves, is trying to analyze this thing. But the moment that I looked up and recognized consciously that's a craft, the beam went out and instantly whatever it was enveloped in this sphere of like plasma, bright white plasma. So definitely plasma in the glow mode. And then quickly that went from one size in a quantum manner, it didn't sort of like increase like this. It went this to twice that big, and then one more time to 4 times that big. And once it hit that third huge sphere of energy, you could tell that it started to accelerate incredibly fast, but in less than a second, that initial motion was gone and it just accelerated so fast it disappeared. No wake, no noise, nothing. Just it was there, and then poof, it was gone.
How do you deal with that? You're soaking wet. You've got your towel on.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a complete ontological shock. And my poor wife, if she hadn't gone in early, she would have been able to see it too. So I go in and I said, you won't believe what just happened out there after you left. So that's why when I got to that point and I told that part of my encounters, and George Knapling's in, he said, they're tracking me. I was just so like goosebumped about that, because I never thought of that as like they would be linked and there would be some tracking me. Why would they be tracking me? To my knowledge, I don't have an implant. I don't have any missing time. So I didn't even tell them about the next encounter. So later we moved from that property down to where I'm currently, this house I'm living in now. It's in the north part of the Tampa Bay, to be closer to kids and grandkids. We moved in here in 2016. It was a brand new house, and we don't have any neighbors behind us. It's a open area with a retention pond and beautiful old growth woods. From our lanai, it's a beautiful place to just sit and see the beauty. And I'm just, kind of appreciating this new house that we have. And I'm standing at the sliding glass doors to the lanai. And I'm just, the doors open slightly and it's very quiet. And something catches my eye out to the northwest of our house, and this bright white, like sphere of light comes zorching down from above. And then it just stops going down, and then it's right over the retention pond, and it's out a little ways, and it starts tracking down, and it's exactly the level of where my eyes are looking out. And as it turns the corner and comes directly behind our house, I would say that, I don't know, it's hard to judge. It's probably a minimum of a 5-foot diameter, maybe more like a 10-foot diameter. But it's this ball of pure white, a sphere. So it's an orb, and I'd never seen an orb before. But suddenly I was really kind of spooked by it, because why is it come down, and why is it now slowed down and practically stopped right behind my house? And it's 70 feet away. So I literally reacted by closing the sliding glass door and drawing the blinds. And then I consciously thought, I hope it doesn't come inside here. So that one kind of weirded me out, because the orb sighting was so different. A craft, being an aerospace engineer, when I see a craft of some kind, even though it's doing things that none of the 7 airplanes I've flown, including, I've been at the edge of space in the U2, flown the B-52 down low and bombed out of the big B-52 bomber. I've done transports and 5 different types of helicopters, and I've even flown the Goodyear blimp and hot air balloons and all kinds of powered parachute craft, and a lot of civilian airplanes. So when I look at a craft of some sort, a structured thing, that's like, okay, that's cool. It's certainly got capabilities beyond anything I know about. But when I see this ball of pure energy, that's not something I can't really put my mind around it and identify and understand it. And what is the reason that it's come? And it didn't stop at my neighbor's house or any of the other places. It just sort of came down fairly quickly and then slowed down, and now it's just sort of, here I am. So that was by far I guess that was more ontologically shocking than the craft were, even though, my first craft was a big deal, and the one at RAF Upper Hazel in 1980. So I've had those 4. I don't know if I'm going to have more, but I guess if George Knapp is right, I might. So I'm not quite sure how to take it all, other than it's important, I think, for people to know. And I know not everybody gets to have a sighting. A lot of people really wish they do, and they go out searching for it. But it's weird, because it's not like they're revealing themselves to everybody. But then there's things like the aerial school, and all the kids are out, and they, come out of the craft and actually having a telepathic conversation with these kids. So, I mean, it's like whoever they are and wherever they are from, because I don't know if they're extraterrestrial, or if they live under our oceans and been here a long time, or if they come and go, and who knows? I mean, there's so many theories out there now. I guess when they want us to know, we'll know, right? But it's certainly been very apparent to me from that first encounter on that, hey, it's kind of cool, because when we look out on the universe and you realize how vast it is, it's hard for me to be so close-minded as to say we're the only sentient life out there. I just think that life's a precious thing, and we now know there's a lot of other planets that seem to be sort of Earth-like. maybe ours is extremely special and unique, but there also seems to be a sort of correlation between the amount of activity from these craft after we, started exploding nuclear weapons. The fission bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, followed by the nuclear fusion bombs. And we have tested so many, and so have other nations, of course. And some of those have been exploded in space, and some of them have been exploded in the air, and some of them have been exploded under the oceans, and some of them have been exploded underground. And I'm sure that the event of particularly a fusion bomb, be like a big blinking light to people that had technology and sensors capability to detect that and say, wow, the monkeys have figured out how to split the atom.
Yeah.
Maybe we got to go check it out. And also there's a lot of things where there seem to be these telepathic messages that are put in about don't blow up your planet, don't destroy yourselves, recognize this is a precious place. So there's a part of me that says, well, if they were going to wipe us all out, they've had plenty of time to do it, and they certainly had the energies. So that doesn't seem to be the motive. So what is it? And could we get to a point where, well, just get along and maybe we learn a lot from them and become better? I don't know if we're there yet. I don't want to say we. I'm saying like the whole population here. We're still very tribalistic, and sort of have our groups and our ways of thinking and how governments work and so forth. Being able to just all get along and quit trying to up one another or have weapons more powerful than the other nation. That's something that we'd have to grow away from if we really want to have this thing be a more unifying experience. But who knows? Maybe if it could be released and said by somebody in authority that, yeah, this is all real and we don't know all of it, but, you're not alone. If that was said at a high enough level, that'd be a good thing, I think, for humanity.
Dan, I mean, you're in a position now where I think it's probably fair to say that you are pretty certain that we're not alone and that there's something that's difficult to explain but is non-human. I think having
Yeah.
multiple experiences, incredible experiences, and having that engineering and the sort of aviation backgrounds,
Right.
you're the person that would know if this is something, especially things like the orb. And
Yeah.
I guess my question really is, as somebody that does know, I guess, and has had that ontological shock from some time ago and again, how has it affected, if at all, your life? Because the way I look at it is, if we were to have this collective understanding and all of society sort of got this speech from their president or prime ministers or whatever, how would it affect us, and how, what would day two look like? And I always find it really interesting to ask people that are pretty like they've had experiences that there's no doubt, there's no doubt that this is something that's not human. How has it affected your life, if at all?
I think that it's given me, I don't know, so from my youngest age, I was always fascinated by trying to contemplate the universe. And so while none of my degrees are specialized in cosmology or astrophysics, I've had enough advanced education that I can follow along some of that. I see these craft, and even the orbs, represent a level of science that's certainly not out there in the public domain. It's not our 100-year-old stuff coming just from um, Einstein. It's not. It's certainly, the universe is not just controlled by the gravitational force. It's very electric. There's plasma in the dark mode that fills the void out there. The James Webb Space Telescope is now revealing so much about the electrical conduits and connectivity between the center of galaxies and the stars and the spiral arms. So I'm not into the whole black hole, dark matter, dark energy, inflation theory, all these things that they've added as band-aids, or what I might call garden gnomes, to try to prop up their theory that it's a gravity-only universe. I think that the James Webb is really confusing them, because it, picture after picture, they said, we have no explanation for this. This doesn't fit our model. But they won't abandon their model and look into plasma cosmology and electric universe theory. So it's kind of just, we have to wait and see when they finally decide, okay, yeah, we can accept something, different form of science. But I still think that maybe within the dark recesses of the controlled UFO UAP world, that maybe some of that science has already been cracked, and maybe it's too scary to release it yet. Like you can learn about nuclear physics in a college course, but they don't teach you how to build a thermonuclear bomb, because that's a very precise recipe, and they don't want that to proliferate, even though, despite our best efforts, it has proliferated into quite a number of nations. People have figured it out, or they've been given the things from another country. So if, as I view it, these people aren't using like gasoline or diesel fuel, or, they're not fueling themselves with some sort of a chemical reaction. I don't think it's even a nuclear power core, because even that would have limitations and have, its own set of drawbacks. I think that they may have cracked the code on how to dip into the quantum vacuum, the 0 point energy, and cohere that somehow. If they've mastered that science, then that pervades everything. I mean, the 0 point field goes through our bodies. It's in our rooms right now. It's everywhere. It pervades everything about our universe. And if you can tap into that literally limitless infinite source of energy, and you can control it, then there are things you could do with that level of energy. And I think, Eric Davis did get into a little of that during his part of the Age of Disclosure movie. And I've seen some other things where he's really started to kind of open up and talk quite a bit about it. But if that's what they're doing, and the monkeys down here get a hold of that and figure it out, then we can destroy our whole planet by a misuse of that somehow. I mean, that's levels of energy that are literally boundless. Everything else we're doing has bounds. You can build a really big thermonuclear fusion bomb, but it's still not infinite. If you have 10,000 of them, I don't know if we're that far along, but we got a lot of them, many thousands of them between the various countries that have these, and everybody gets into World War III and starts firing at each other, then we pretty well have destroyed life on this planet from that point for maybe thousands of years. That'd be a terrible catastrophe. So I'd like to see us be able to avoid that. And if we need a little help from another higher level of intelligence that can maybe keep us from doing that, that'd be welcome. But I don't think that they're here to take over. I don't think they're trying to destroy us all. But I mean, the people that have been abducted, have been put through some traumatic stuff. And what are they collecting from them? What are these samples? What are they doing with that? I don't know. There's so many theories out there. It's really fun to contemplate. Did they have a role many years ago in establishing us? The cuneiform tablets of the Sumerian culture, the Anunnaki, and is that true? Is that part of it? Is our sect of those now revisiting to see how we're doing this many thousands of years later? And then you look at the stuff that, like, I don't know if you follow Jay Anderson on Project Unity, or look at any of his stuff. It's fascinating. He's looking at this megalithic architecture that seems to go beyond the 12,500 year ago point to where there was advanced technology that they were using to create these structures in these huge, like thousands, tens, thousands of ton blocks that we can't do today. And with the precision that they're cut and where the stones are laid, it's fascinating to say, okay, I don't think the mainstream progression of caveman to this with a linear kind of thing happened. I think there are catastrophic events that have happened on the planet that we've recovered from. And I think one of those was about 12,000 years ago. And it seems like when you look back through the geological evidence of history, ice cores and so forth, that 12,000 year ago event may recur about every 12,000 or so years, at least back to 72,000 years ago. It seems to be pretty close to that. So are we approaching another one of those? Could it be a micronova from our sun that creates that? Where our magnetic field has been decreasing and decreasing and decreasing at an ever faster rate. And there's prediction that our poles are going to flip. There's even some analysis that says that if there is a solar micronova, which appears to be a recurring thing, and now we're actually seeing other stars that go micronova, and they don't like the supernova and they go away. The star's still there. They've cast off some material. It has some temporary effects, but then things begin to recover. So I think there's science there that certain people are probing into a little bit. Maybe whoever's visiting, if they're coming from another planet, they've been monitoring over eons this cycle within our solar system. Maybe they're going to try to help us, at least some of us, survive that so that the planet can be recently populated afterwards. Who knows? I mean, we could just fantasize a lot about it.
Yeah, it's
But I find
unspeculated.
it's a fascinating topic to talk about it. I'm not scared of whatever it is, because I see the evidence over my lifetime that they could have hurt me if they wanted to, but they didn't. I've not been taken aboard a craft that I'm aware of. I don't have any implants that I know of, but why have I had 4 experiences? I have no explanation for that. I'm not special. So there are probably people who have had more. And there are people certainly that have had more intense, up close with alien beings, non-human intelligence. Certainly Travis Walton's story is fascinating. And he's been really consistent on it over the years, and he passed a number of lie detector tests. Lie detector tests are interesting. I've been in some programs where I had to do that regularly because, they're just constantly making sure that everybody's on the up and up and you're not violating your non-disclosure agreements. And I got a bunch of those, but fortunately, none of them are UAP related. So I'm not a whistleblower because I wasn't inside of any of these programs. I just had these experiences and was finally willing to share them because there is some interest out there for such things. And okay, great. Let's talk about it now because I'm done working. I'm done doing government work. So.
Well, I think it's so important. It really is to have people of your caliber and your experience, heroes to many of us and patriots coming forward and saying, actually, I'm a serious person and I know that, I've got these credentials, but actually I'm prepared to be quite vulnerable and put myself forward and say, look, I've had these experiences, especially with the stigma that's attached to it. And that's not something that we've had a lot of until quite recently. It was very few and far between would come forward. And I think that's so important.
I agree. But I do think some of the stigma is starting to evaporate. With some people that may never, they may just always be stuck into, you're a crazy guy. But at this point, people can make their own judgment. And if they want to think I'm a crazy guy, that's okay. That's their prerogative. I can't control their mind or their judgment levels. But at the same time, because I do understand that my background, my education, my experiences, all the different planes I've flown, my being an aerospace engineer with advanced degrees, that has some degree of credibility. They can't just say, well, he's some kook, that drank too much whiskey on the side of a river and saw something and doesn't know what he saw. No, I still don't know what I saw, but I can describe it pretty well. And I do know that it's nothing like any of the 70 different craft that I have flown and had the privilege of controlling. So what is it? I don't have that answer. I don't know where it's from or what it is. They haven't done a telepathic download to me. So will that happen someday with humans? So that are there people that maybe know already because they've had some of that information? I would like to see a lot of that come out. I think the human race can handle that. I hope we can. But yeah, for me, it was like, okay, I'm interested enough. I can't just sit back and absorb everybody else's stories and events. If I've got something that's happened and somebody wants to hear it, I'm willing to tell them. So I'm not pushing out. I'm not starting my own channel. I'm not trying to promote myself in any way. But, when individuals like yourself come forward and are interested, why wouldn't I share that with you? Especially, you live in England now? In the UK?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm sure that in the UK, you're very interested in the Rendlesham Forest thing and the complexity of that as it's unfolded over the years. And that was fascinating. So there's Gary's book, Gary Hasseltine.
Yeah, Gary Aston. Yeah, I've interviewed Gary before. Nice guy.
He's amazing. So he and I've had some interviews, and you've talked further, and I did the UK form where I've formally reported into the UK system for my sighting from RAF Upper Hayford. And he requested that I do that, and I was willing to do that. And he and I have had some great chats, and he's an amazing person. His detective background has given him the skills. So these 500 pages are detailed interviews by somebody who spent a lifetime perfecting the skill of drawing the truth out of people with his techniques. And so he used those techniques on me, which is good. I wanted him to. And he found me to be credible, so that's good. But he really has some interesting way of doing interviews because he probes in and asks very, very detailed questions that if you're just making it out of thin air, you wouldn't be able to dig back in your memory and find what he calls the extra snowflakes of stuff that's there that you just didn't bring out in testimony initially, but when you're probed on it, you can. And I really appreciate people like him, people like yourself that are, doing the work to put out the word. I'm sure you have an audience that follows you regularly. And so if there's some value to anything that I've got to say, you're welcome to it. And if you need some other things, just let me know by email and I'll send you if you want any other thing. Like I do have an FBI forensic artist that drew up my UFO encounter in the RAF Upper Hayford incident. I'm not an artist, so I didn't have the skills to do anything that was worth a crap. But they did, and I interviewed on behalf of. I did share with Ryan Graves for the Americans for Safe Aerospace. Him and Brad Crispin interviewed me and asked later if I would be willing to have an interview sit down via Microsoft Teams with the FBI. And so they have a group of FBI agents that did a very thorough interview. And of course, they have access to all my professional background stuff. And they provided a forensic artist that was able to take, with a few iterations, I had to go back and help the artist understand the plasma-like effect of the lighting. Initially, it was drawn as just a bunch of light bulbs of different colors. I said, well, I wouldn't really like that. But after a few iterations, we got it where it really looks like when the final one came through, I stepped back from the computer screen because I go, whoa, it's like I'm there again. So that's a pretty good image.
Thank you so much for talking to me, Dan. It's fascinating and really descriptive, and I think that's what's so wonderful about somebody who has that engineering background and especially the aviation background, because you're really good at describing what's normal and what's not and what sticks out. And I think that I really got that from your testimony. Fantastic stuff. It's such a unique, interesting experience, and I really appreciate you coming forward now and sharing it. It means a lot to a lot of people. I think it adds that credibility and the validation to a lot of people, I think, that have had the sighting but perhaps not had those credibility things that you mentioned yourself. I'm very
And I feel
grateful.
good about, people like you that are out there as kind of individuals that are trying to bring truth and experiences forward to your followers. I'm sure you've got a pretty loyal audience of followers that follow your channel a lot. And because there are probably a lot of UK followers, I feel like it's my duty to help them understand that, yes, it's not just happening in Roswell or the United States somewhere else. It's happening all over the world. Looking forward to the update to Moment of Contact that James Fox
Yeah,
is
that's
doing,
fantastic.
because that's coming
Yeah,
out in December. The excerpts from that about the doctor saying that he was told he needed to see a patient and that's face to face with a non-human intelligence. That's pretty powerful stuff that even people in other countries are finally willing to break their silence and tell the truth about it. So it's good. Maybe as a world community, as more and more people are willing to come forward and share what they know and the experiences that they've had, it will
yeah.
help all of us to have a better common understanding.